I don't think it would be a very controversial statement if I came out and said that I have a general dislike for EA. Honestly, dislike doesn't even really do it justice. I dislike ham on pizza. This is much more than that. I think straight up burning hatred more accurately describes how I feel about EA. There seems to be a consensus on the internet that generally, the way that Electronic Arts conducts their business isn't beneficial to anyone except for them. And as I'm sure you can already tell, I very much agree. But don't confuse that as me saying I don't think you should play their games. In my life, I've played a lot of Madden and a lot of The Sims. Not to mention Mass Effect is one of my favorite game series ever, which might confuse some of you. Because if I play and enjoy their games so much, then why do I hate them? And to that I would say, because I play their games as much as I do, it gives me all the more reason to despise their existence. Think about it this way, EA does shitty things, but if you don't really play their games and you're looking at it from a distance, it doesn't really affect you all that much. But I'm looking at this from my fans' perspective, having those shitty things done to me. Year after year, I've had to watch as EA made some of my favorite game franchises worse and worse until there was nothing left but a desecrated corpse of the thing I had once loved. So today, I want to explain how shitty EA really is to their customers and how that ends up hurting the game industry. And if you don't already think so, hopefully by the end of this video, you'll realize what a cancer EA really is to the game industry.
This is not okay. This is cancer.
Before EA was the corporate giant that we recognize it as today, and before it had a metric ton of video game IPs under its belt, there was The Sims. Not to say that EA didn't have other successful games under their belt before the OG Sims came out back in 2000. For example, they had Madden since the 90s and way too many Bard's Tale games to count. But The Sims is what would put them on the map. And this might surprise you by the way I've talked about this company up until this point, but I don't really have any issues with the first 3 Sims games. Now, I only played the original Sims once in 2006 on my sister's computer for like 15 minutes, so I really wouldn't be able to do that game justice with a first-hand account. But for what I was able to tell in research for this video, the original Sims was the least scummy in the series, meaning that it didn't try and drain every piece of fucking lint from your wallet. Keep in mind, most of my gripes with EA pertain to how they sell their products, that being the game itself, DLC, or microtransactions. EA is just the publisher, so they don't actually make the games most of the time. That being said, I'd like to make it clear that I have no issues with any of the developers at EA. I guarantee that these guys crunch like a motherfucker to make these games. My issues lie solely with the executives. With the exception of a few instances, the games themselves aren't the problem. And when they are the problem, it's mostly the fault of EA's restricting deadlines and making the game designed in a way where buying a card pack, loot box, or season pass is easier than the ridiculous grind they make you go through. So there were 7 expansions to the original Sims. They added new items, characters, and gameplay features. Most of the time you won't see me complain about this. DLC, whether it's paid or free, is more often than not a good thing. And in this case, as well as the next 2 games in the series, it's mostly true. Sims 2 and 3 worked pretty much the same way with the expansions as the first did, so I'm not going to go too in depth there. And yes, it is fucking gosh darn ridiculous that I have to pay give or take around $100 to get the full experience from a game that came out when I was in middle school, but actually it's pretty fucking reasonable when compared to the level of bullshit that EA pulled and is still actively pulling with The Sims 4. But really quick, if you're not at all familiar with The Sims, let me explain what the base version of The Sims 4 is really like. If I had to describe it in one word, that word would be incomplete. The base game for The Sims is bare fucking bones. Sims 4's launch was kinda notoriously shitty because of the critical reviews. GameSpot gave it a 6 out of 10, IGN gave it a 7.5, and of course everybody's favorite games journalist, Hardcore Gamer, gave it a 2.5 out of 5. Honestly, I was a little surprised when I found this out, because I never thought The Sims 4 was really that bad. Like I said, I played it a lot. So I went on my PS4 and played Sims 4 there with no DLC whatsoever, just the base game. And you know what? I get it. You want bowling? $10. You want to go to college? $40. You want the simple pleasure of having Halloween decorations? You totally can, but only after you pay $10. One of the game's journalists who reviewed the game when it first came out said that it was basically The Sims 3 but shrunken and sterile, which is really the problem when releasing the same game over and over again like it's Madden. Most fans are going to expect some kind of improvement from Sims 3 to Sims 4. Having pets be an expansion was an acceptable idea in The Sims 2 when it was a new idea. But come on, man, that shit came out like 20 years ago. When am I gonna have to stop paying for my virtual dogs? Sims 2, 3, and 4 have all had pets, university, and seasons expansion packs. And you'd think that if they've been making the same content for this long now, then why the fuck is it not in the base game yet? Because those 3 expansions are their best-selling DLCs. And also because EA doesn't give a fuck about you or me or any of the other millions of people that play and enjoy their games. They don't give a shit about the customer's enjoyment, all they care about is the customer's money. And speaking of money, have you ever wondered how much The Sims 4 really cost? Alright, let's say you wanted to purchase with your hard-earned money The Sims 4 and all of its expansions. How much exactly is that going to run you? Well, I'll tell you. But first we need some context. Sims 4 has a lot of DLC, but not all of it is the classic full-blown expansion pack that adds a bunch of new gameplay features. Some just add furniture and clothing, so obviously these ones will be priced differently than the big ones. Lots of games do this, it isn't unique to The Sims. Most of you have probably played Skyrim, so think the Dragonborn expansion compared to Hearthfire. All of these DLCs for The Sims 4, which there are a total of 36 of, are divided into 3 different categories: expansion packs, game packs, and stuff packs. Expansion packs are the big dogs, major changes to the game like adding a weather system or pets, things that will seriously change up how you play, the traditional DLC. Game packs are usually a minor version of the expansion pack, only adding one new feature that won't necessarily change the way you play, but can spice things up and add some variety. Stuff packs are the smallest DLC, they only add a few items like clothing and furniture. Now, obviously these 3 tiers each offer varying levels of content, so naturally they're all priced differently. Assuming there's no sale going on when you decide to buy them, expansion packs are going to cost $40, game packs are going to be $20, and stuff packs are going to run you $10. I'm sure most of you have already picked up on why this is straight up bullshit, but I'm going to keep going, just so you can see the level of insanity that this shit is at, and why exactly I hate this greedy, hungry hippo-ass company. So, like I said in the beginning, let's assume there's no sale going on right now, and you want to get everything The Sims 4 has to offer. Now, the base price for the game itself is $40, which is bullshit for a game that came out in 2014, but let's give them some leeway and say that the base game is $5, because it's pretty much constantly on sale. Like I mentioned earlier, there are 36 DLC packs. Of that 36, there are 10 actual expansion packs at the $40 price, which already totals out to a whopping $400. Next are the game packs, of which there are 9, each of them are $20, that would add $180 to our total cost. And finally, the stuff packs, there are 17 of these, they're $10, which of course adds to $170. Now let's add all those up. $400 in expansion packs, $180 in game packs, $170 in stuff packs, and finally the $5 for the actual game. So when we go to checkout, it's going to cost us, with tax included, $817.29. This is straight up highway robbery, and beyond fucking ridiculous. The fact that EA is charging this much for one game and some expansion is fucking bonkers. I mean, they can't seriously expect the consumer to pay damn near $1,000 for one game, right? Well, actually no. I really don't think they do. When I first wrote the rough draft to this script, there was a Black Friday sale going on, and every time there's a big sale on Origin, Sims 4 and all of its expansions drop in price. The same amount almost every time. The expansion packs go down from $40 to $20, the game packs go from $20 to $15, and the stuff packs go from $10 to $5, which to be fair, is actually pretty reasonable. For comparison, the Dawnguard and Dragonborn expansions for Skyrim released at $20 and the Hearthfire released for $5. Even though in my opinion you get a lot more out of those DLCs for how much you're paying, you can still tell that this discounted price is about what companies are charging for DLCs. But like I said, this is with a discount applied. The price drops from $817.29 all the way down to $454.26. That's a $360 difference. Now, while this is a pretty crazy amount, keep in mind you're getting a game and almost 40 DLC packs. So, all in all, not that outrageous. But hold on a second. It sounds an awful lot like I'm giving EA a compliment, which, don't worry, that's not what's happening at all. I just like to keep this in perspective that even with a 50% discount applied, all I'm saying is that the price isn't that bad. Which is not what one would usually say about a product that's half off. Usually we'd say, that's a good ass deal, I need to get that. That's what's called a sense of urgency. You feel the need to purchase it before the price shoots back up. For EA, this is doubly effective. Instead of the usual, oh that's a good deal, the customer instead says, well that other price is so fucking ridiculous that I need to get this now before the price goes back up and another sale doesn't come around for 6 months. Now look, I want to make it very clear that I'm a guy with a laptop making YouTube videos. The only economics experience I have was in my AP economics class in high school that I finished with like a 71 in. I took an intro to finance class last semester and I dropped out 4 days in. I am not a lawyer and I am not an accountant. But this sounds an awful lot like price gouging. They set the price so fucking high that it's unreasonable, and whenever they do put it on sale at a somewhat reasonable amount, it creates an artificial sense of urgency. If someone wants to correct me in the comments below, go ahead, but even if I've got the terminology technology wrong, it doesn't change the fact that they're still pieces of shit for doing it. They're punishing true fans of the game who buy it at the retail cost by making them pay double what they should, and at the same time they're punishing people who wait to buy them by making them wait as long as 4 to 6 months for the next sale. And even then, it's not like they're getting a groundbreaking deal, all they're getting is what it should cost in the first place. It's a shame that stuff like this has to happen to a game like The Sims, because over the years I found myself genuinely enjoying this game series, but the greedy marketing tactics have made this game damn near unbearable, and there's no one to blame for that except for EA, and trust me, this is only the beginning. The Madden NFL franchise is a really odd one for me to talk about. With The Sims and Bioware, I've at least had good experiences with the games themselves, but that's mostly because of the fact that EA didn't develop The Sims or any of Bioware's games, they just slap a price tag on it. But for Madden it's different, because EA not only publishes these games, but they also develop them. So in the case of Madden's yearly trashing, mostly by fans, there's no one to blame but EA, and trust me, they more than deserve it. From 1998 to 2020, there have been 40 editions of the Madden NFL game franchise. These games run on everything from MS-DOS to Windows 10, from the SNES to the GameCube to the Wii and the Wii U, 5 different PlayStations, 4 Xboxes, and even your phone. Time progresses, technology progresses, but Madden stays the same, especially in the past 8 years. Nowadays, the only part of Madden that seems to be progressing is the year in which they're released. Seriously, just look at the part of Madden's Wikipedia article where they summarize each game. The past 10 games can be summed up in a paragraph or less. Madden 20's section is literally 2 sentences long. That should tell you how much really changes from game to game. Look, you're probably thinking right about now, okay, I agree with the whole EA is worse than Hitler theme of this video, but in this one particular instance, I think you might be playing it up just a little bit. Well, first off, yes, but that's kind of the point. And secondly, actually no, I'm downplaying it, if anything. In 2012, there was a shift in how Madden was developed. Madden 12 was your standard run-of-the-mill Madden. There wasn't anything to knock your socks off, it was just Madden. But in the next game, lots of things were changed up, and not in a good way. Madden 13 actually removed features that had previously been a part of the game, like a lot of features. There was a comprehensive list posted on Madden's subreddit a few years ago, but keep in mind this post is over 4 years old, so some of these features have been added back in, but most haven't. Let me just list a few. Any kind of assistant coaches, create a stadium, create a fan, create a play, expansion draft, pregame show, no, this does not count, or literally just which team a player played on in the stats. So why exactly did Madden 13 remove features that were in previous games? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are a couple different answers that you can give. First off, Madden 13 was the first in the series to be solely released on the 7th generation of consoles, those being the PS3 and Xbox 360, so maybe there was some clunkiness in the transition. Second, Madden 13 marks the game that started it all, and by it all, I mean microtransactions. Loot boxes disguised as card packs with your favorite football players on them. Madden 13 is when EA started to heavily push Ultimate Team as a main play mode, even over franchise. This is what would start a trend of focusing less and less on gameplay and franchise mode, and instead focusing on Ultimate Team and some variations of it, since that was and still is their most profitable game mode. Thirdly, Rex Dixon. Let's talk about this one. If you're not familiar with Madden, I'm willing to bet that you're not familiar with Rex Dixon. Hell, even if you do play Madden, there's a chance that you won't have a fucking clue who he is. So, if you aren't aware, Rex was the creative director of the Madden NFL franchise for around 6 years, taking over in 2012 with the development of Madden 13 and leaving in May of 2018. Just a few months before Madden 19's release. Now, obviously, people want to put the blame solely on his shoulders. After all, he was the creative director during what most people would consider the steep decline in quality for these games. Creative director means that he had a hand in most, if not all, creative decisions having to do with the franchise. But remember, this is EA we're talking about, so all logic goes straight out the fucking window. I mean, think about it. If you didn't already know about this topic before clicking on this video, let me ask you, and be honest, did you have any idea who Rex Dixon was? Before starting research for this video, I sure as hell didn't. How is it possible that you are the creative director of a franchise as wildly successful and popular as Madden, and it goes relatively unnoticed? He's not even given a credit on the Wikipedia page for any of the games he oversaw. Usually, at least the director will get a nod. Look at Skyrim. Todd Howard is listed as the game director. God of War, there's a team of developers. Hell, even E.T., the game's so bad it nearly killed the entire industry. The designer is still listed, but honestly that's probably just a form of public shaming, so I don't know if that one counts. But still, my point remains the same. Even some of the Madden games after Rex left the company have given their developers proper credit, but not Rex. Why do you think that is? Well, maybe because this director doesn't have as much control as one would think given his title. As a publishing company, EA doesn't let anything happen without their express permission. But in this case, EA is not only the publisher, they're also the developer. Whether you agree with it or not, video games for a lot of people, specifically the people that spend thousands of hours working their ass off to develop these games, they consider games as their form of artistic expression. Now, I'm not saying that Madden or Mario is art and it should be considered that way by everyone who plays them, but for some, these games are how they express themselves. It's the only way they can. I know this is super cliche and pretentious to say, but it doesn't really matter what I or anyone else really thinks. It only matters what you take away from it. During my first semester of college, I took an art appreciation class, just so I could have something that I didn't have to show up to but still make an A in. On the first day, one of the only times I went to that class, our professor said something that I thought about when considering this part of the video. Art is whatever you want it to be. You can whip your dick out and piss on that wall, and if you personally take something away from it more than, hey, I just pissed on the wall, then congratulations, you made art. That's the weird thing about art, but it's also what's so great about it. Anything can be art, from painting to cooking to game development to even poorly made video essays. It's all in the eyes of the beholder. But I don't think the people in charge at EA see Madden as art, or even that they see the creative side of making these games. I think EA sees video games as the way they make their money. I think they see them as a number on a spreadsheet. I think they see them as one number in particular, $5.54 billion. That's the amount of revenue that Electronic Arts generated in 2020's fiscal year. Over $3 billion of that was profit, and over $21 million went straight smack dab into Andrew Wilson's bank account, the CEO of EA. So to answer the question that started all this, who is to blame for Madden's sharp decline in quality over the past 8 or so years? Well, as we've established throughout the course of this section, EA doesn't see video games as an art form. Maybe they once did, but that isn't the case anymore. And despite the fact that many of us might feel a certain type of way about it, this method of thinking has proven very profitable for EA. So even if Rex Dixon did have a positive plan for the game whenever he took over in 2012, I don't think it would have mattered, because EA is a corporation looking to improve their profits, not a developer looking to provide an experience. And it seemed Rex thought the same thing in this now deleted tweet. They rejected my fixed gameplay strategy because it wasn't marketable. I think this alone shows how the corporate side of this company really works. They'd rather find ways to improve profits rather than improve the actual game. Speaking of deleted tweets, before we wrap this section of the video up, I wanted to talk about an ex-employee of EA and someone who specifically worked on Madden 13 and left shortly after its release. He posted a now deleted rant on Twitter about the state of Madden and EA back in 2012. This is AJ. AJ is an interesting fellow. I'll leave a link to the article that captured this whole rant before it was deleted. It's quite an interesting read. But for the video, I'm going to have my friend TheClooch read a few key ones out.
Sadly, any corporate involvement in a creative business is doomed to fail because creativity is stiffed by corporate culture. It's sad that so many brilliant people at EA are held back by corporate structure. Seriously, don't trust EA. Not because they're bad, they do good by their people, but they're robotic. They see video games as a collection of features. They don't see the artistic aspects of it. NFL fans deserve better than what EA gives them. Simple as that.
That last one. Couldn't have said it better myself. NFL fans, Madden fans, Sims, Bioware, just consumers of EA's products deserve better. There have been 40 editions of Madden since the original release in 1988, most of them being fully priced at $60. EA is living, breathing proof that you really don't even have to try to make a fuck ton of money in this industry, because even though they haven't put any effort into one of these games since 2004, when video games looked like this and I looked like this, the Madden franchise has still managed to be worth an estimated $4 billion. They released the same copy and paste bullshit of a game with awful graphics, broken gameplay, and the same $60 price tag every year. And they even have the fucking gall to add microtransactions. AJ is right. Fans deserve better than what EA gives them. It's just too bad EA doesn't give a fuck about their fan base. Before we begin this section of the video, let me be 100% clear here. It's very hard for me to criticize Bioware. Yes, this video is mostly about EA and why they should change the way they do their business, but when talking about the downfall of Bioware, they are not completely without blame, and I'm not going to try and pretend like they are. Now, the reason it's very hard for me to criticize Bioware is because of my relationship with this development studio. As I mentioned at the top of the video, Mass Effect is one of my favorite game series ever, but what I didn't mention is Dragon Age is my favorite game series ever. I'm telling you all this just so you know I'm not going to be able to be completely unbiased when talking about them. And I'm also telling you this just so you can understand why exactly that EA's treatment of one of my favorite development companies really pisses me off as much as it does. As you probably saw, this section is titled The Slow and Painful Death of Bioware, and I honestly believe that's not a stretch. A few months ago, around July or August, I wrote a script titled How EA Is Killing Bioware. One glance at my channel will make it plain to see that I never ended up making that video. But you can see just by the title back then, I thought there was some kind of hope for Bioware to return to form, but that's no longer the case, and I'm going to explain why. The downfall of Bioware honestly began in 2017 with the release of Mass Effect Andromeda, and just got progressively worse from there. With the release of Anthem and a few key members of Bioware's team leaving the company, that has pretty much all but killed this development studio. But for us to understand the fall, first we gotta talk about the rise. So I could talk about Baldur's Gate, or Neverwinter Nights, or KOTOR, and Bioware's rise to fame and popularity in the late 90s and early 2000s, but this is a very heavily opinionated video. And my opinion of the studio and their games begins in late 2012 or early 2013, whenever my mom and I were in GameStop getting Wii Sports or some shit like that from my older cousin. And out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a game that, with no exaggeration, would change how I view video games to this day. I've gotten a lot of new subscribers recently, so some of you might not be aware that I absolutely love this video game. I have almost 500 hours on Steam and many more than that on my Xbox 360 and Xbox One. I played the fuck out of this game. Every year for the past damn near decade at this point, I've gone back and played Dragon Age Origins, at least for a little bit. This game is my favorite game of all time, and it sparked my love for this game studio. And it also sparked my love for RPGs, mostly because it was the first one of this genre I had ever played. Before I ever laid my eyes on Dragon Age Origins, I played a lot of GTA 4 whenever my mom went to bed. I played a lot of Batman Arkham Asylum and City, and 12-year-old me would probably say that Spider-Man 2 was my favorite game. But Dragon Age Origins would change my perspective by a lot. Without this game, I probably wouldn't have watched Game of Thrones, played Skyrim, or consumed much, if any, media set in the medieval era. Because before this game, I didn't have much interest in the genre. So when I talk about my connection with any of these properties, I inevitably think back on Dragon Age. And as I'm sure you can tell, this enhances my connection with this game and the studio even more so. From Dragon Age, I went to Mass Effect and eventually Mass Effect 2, and I even went back and played KOTOR 1 and 2. I was hooked. I had never experienced anything quite like it. In all the games I'd played before, I got to play as the main character. But in Bioware games, I was the main character. These characters were more than just a collection of pixels to me. They were real, and how I played the game, the decisions that I made, they mattered. What I did would change the world around me, which was a complete foreign concept to me, but I was all for it. But little did I know, it was all downhill from here. Like I mentioned earlier, Bioware didn't really start to collapse until around 2017 with the release of Mass Effect Andromeda. But before that, there was a slow and steady decline over the next couple of releases. After Mass Effect 2 was released in early 2010, not even a year and a half later, Bioware would drop Dragon Age 2 in March of 2011. Remember, Dragon Age Origins was released in 2009, and they wouldn't finish developing and releasing DLC until March of 2010, and only a year later we get its sequel. Video games take a long time to make, most of them do anyway, especially RPGs. I was 10 whenever Skyrim came out, and I'm turning 20 this year. But still, it doesn't seem like Elder Scrolls 6 is anywhere near complete. But for me personally, I would rather have a delayed game than one that comes out half-baked. Just look at Cyberpunk. So why exactly did Dragon Age 2 come out as rushed as it did? Well, that would be because of studio interference. This is a term usually used more so when talking about filmmaking. Usually a producer will get overly involved with the creative process and the film is worse off because of it. For example, in Spider-Man 3, the director Sam Raimi wanted to have Sandman as the villain, but Sony wanted Venom, so they compromised and put both of them in. As a result, the film jumps from one to the other and can at times feel like an incoherent mess. This is a perfect example of studio interference. But EA's studio interference comes in the form of a deadline. Whenever the last bit of Dragon Age Origins DLC was being released, EA told Bioware they only had 14 to 16 months to develop and release Dragon Age 2. This was so the release of Dragon Age 2 didn't interfere with Mass Effect 3's sales, which would be released a year later. Mass Effect was the cash cow back then, so EA would prefer to see Dragon Age suffer rather than Mass Effect. And it did. Dragon Age 2 was forced to reuse a lot of assets from Dragon Age Origins. As a result, the game can look downright ugly at times. 2011 was probably the best year for games in recent memory, but Dragon Age 2 is a blemish on this year's outstanding record. Instead of being compared to Skyrim and The Witcher 2 which were also released in 2011, this game is more comparable to Duke Nukem Forever. And I see this as, without a doubt, being EA's fault. Being given 14 months to make an entire video game is a ridiculous request, and it's obvious why this game turned out like it did. But oddly enough, this is still what some might consider the good old days when looking at BioWare's catalog. In 2012, Mass Effect 3 was released to relatively positive reviews. While it's still considered a great game, most would call it a step down from the instant classic that fans saw Mass Effect 2 as. In particular, people were critical about how ultimately black and white they saw the ending as, and a much more satisfying ending to the series was locked behind a paywall in the form of DLC. In the Sim section of the video, I mentioned how most of the time DLC was a positive thing. Well, that isn't the case here. DLC should be something additional that adds to the overall experience, but it shouldn't be a necessary requirement to the player's enjoyment. After Mass Effect 3, there was the release of Dragon Age Inquisition in 2014. Generally, Inquisition was received well, but again, we see a bit of a dip in score from Mass Effect 3 to Inquisition. Some of the criticism with this game is mainly about the story not being as well written as the first game or the Mass Effect series as a whole. I know we kind of went off track there, but that was only to point out that even with Mass Effect 3 and Dragon Age Inquisition receiving mostly positive reviews, we're beginning to see some bumps in the road. I should mention that Dragon Age Inquisition was named Game of the Year in 2014, but I actually think this is more because of the lack of selection. Besides Destiny, Dark Souls 2, and Wolfenstein, there really wasn't much of a selection in 2014. And even being selected Game of the Year doesn't really change my point. These aren't the unanimous classics like KOTOR or Origins or the first two Mass Effects. And this might come as a surprise given how much I've shit on them throughout the video, but I don't think this is EA's fault. It seems to me like BioWare just lost their groove. I'd really like to say this was only temporary, but
I can't lie!
in 2017, BioWare would release Mass Effect Andromeda to the masses. And good lord, the chaos.
Hey Tony, give me 2 drinks, huh? Like a Mexican. The fuck?
To who? To whom? And your goddamn father. Sorry, my face is tired from...
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
You what army?
I don't need an army. I've got it broken.
Can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man. Damn you! God damn you all to hell!
To list all the problems with this game would most likely double the video's runtime, so I'm going to keep it short, but here are some of the issues fans and critics had with this colossal mess of a game. So, the original trilogy was designed using the Unreal Engine, but EA wanted the new Mass Effect game as well as many of their other titles to start using the Frostbite engine. As a result, the team had to basically redevelop all of their assets from scratch. They couldn't reuse anything from any of the first 3 Mass Effect games, which it should be pretty obvious that takes a lot of time and money. It's basically the opposite of what they did in Dragon Age 2. Where that game reused any and all assets they could from Dragon Age Origins, Mass Effect was crippled by the inability to reuse anything. Also keep in mind that the Frostbite engine was not designed with role-playing games in mind. This engine is more suited for faster-paced action games. It got so bad at one point that EA even had to bring in some members from the Need for Speed team to give the Mass Effect team some help with the engine. And because remaking all of these assets took so long, it took a massive chunk out of their time limit. Yes, even though EA saw how it turned out in Dragon Age 2, they still put another time restriction on Mass Effect Andromeda. It's been said that something like 80% of this game was developed in the last 18 months, and that 18 months was basically a crunch the entire time. But even after all the developers busted their asses for a year and a half and even had to delay the game by 5 months, it still wasn't enough. The game wasn't finished. They didn't have time to animate all the mouth movements by hand, so they regulated the vast majority of it to a computer software, which is why the sex scenes are much higher quality compared to the relatively simple mouth movements. A human did one and a computer did the other. This time restraint is also why there's essentially no depth to the character creator whatsoever. It wasn't a top priority of the things that the game needed to function, so it went noticeably underdeveloped compared to other games being released around the same time. And then there was the issue of inexperience. BioWare's A team, which is located in Edmonton, was assigned to the task of beginning development on Anthem. So they assigned Mass Effect Andromeda to a brand new team located in Montreal. This group of developers actually consisted mostly of fans of the original trilogy that had come to BioWare looking to work on a Mass Effect game. Like they say, be careful what you wish for. As well as the team being unfamiliar with the series, so was the game director. Casey Hudson was the creative director for the first 3 Mass Effect games, but left the company in 2014 after accepting a position at Microsoft. After Casey's departure, Aaron Flynn was placed at the head of Mass Effect Andromeda, and while he'd worked at BioWare for nearly 2 decades, he wasn't Casey Hudson, which is why the tone for Andromeda is a much lighter one in comparison to the original games. After Andromeda's release in 2017, Aaron would leave the company only a few months later. After this, Casey Hudson would return to the company to work on both Anthem and Dragon Age 4, but apparently not for long, because Casey Hudson and Mark Dara, who is a notable veteran producer of the Dragon Age series, would both leave in early December of last year. But perhaps that's getting a bit ahead of myself, because we have to talk about Anthem. The game that was in development for 7 years and still managed to come out half-baked. The game that many of this company's projects were rushed out for, and perhaps the biggest reason that Mass Effect Andromeda failed. Without Anthem, Andromeda would have gotten the time and attention that it deserved, but none of that really mattered because EA saw an opportunity to make money. Basically, how they structured this game is as a free-to-play looter shooter, except it's fully priced, where pay-to-win loot boxes and microtransactions are prioritized over fundamental gameplay and story elements, because EA cares more about making a casino rather than a video game. That way they can unlawfully manipulate impressionable kids into buying loot boxes that maybe have something good in them, which is, in every sense of the word, gambling. BioWare was one of the most promising and beloved game studios in the past 20 years, but EA and their greedy tactics have ruined all of that. And after Casey Hudson and Mark Dara left last December during the middle of Dragon Age 4's development, and with rumors swirling around that Dragon Age 4 might be online only, well, it seems to me like BioWare is all but gone at this point, drained of all the talent and potential they once had for nothing more except a few extra bucks by their corporate overlords.
Look how they massacred my boy.
I think it's pretty obvious how I feel about this company at this point. EA is greedy beyond measure. There is no passion behind the work that this robotic, black hole for happiness corporation does. Now, I think the developers of these games have passion. Being a game developer is really freaking hard, man. Especially working under a company like EA, where, from what I've been able to tell from ex-employee first-hand accounts, risky or outside-of-the-box ideas or anything that EA deems a detriment to their profit is heavily frowned upon and almost always shot down. This corporate cloud is always hanging over everyone's heads and is stunting their developers' creativity, and it takes away the artistic elements of making games. Which is really ironic coming from a company whose name is Electronic Arts. This needs to stop. EA needs to change. Here's my unsolicited advice. Give BioWare back full creative control over the Mass Effect and Dragon Age franchises. Drop the prices for The Sims down to the discounted price, and during the sales event only reduce it 20% instead of 50%. That way the retail prices aren't as outrageous and the consumer would still be getting a discount without forcing them into a corner of either buy now or overpay later. And how about you package all of this, Sims 4 and all of its DLCs, into one Game of the Year edition or special edition or something along those lines. Give your consumers one easily accessible way to purchase and experience everything that a game has to offer. Now, if you're hell-bent on releasing a new Madden every single year, drop the price down to $30 or $40, or release it as a paid update. That way you're giving the players what they want and you're giving your developers more than a 12-month time frame to make an improved game. Every few years, once you've made a considerable improvements in the game, meaning gameplay-wise or graphically, then, and only then, release a fully priced new version. Don't get me wrong, you will definitely lose money doing this, but you will do something that is essential at this point. You will win back a lot of fans like myself, and it will begin to heal the relationship with the community as a whole. This won't happen overnight. The damage done over the years can't be repaired by making a few changes. As you make new games, you'll need to prove that you're dropping the anti-consumer attitude that you've been spreading to other game companies in the industry for years now. Make the Mass Effect Remaster free to those who have all the games on Steam and Origin, like Bethesda did with the Special Edition, or just have it cost $5 like Telltale did with their Batman game. Reward people for being fans of your games. Look at Hello Games. Do what they did. They made mistakes, released an unfinished game to people who expected the second coming of Ocarina of Time. And after getting trashed by everyone, they eventually worked their way up and even eventually exceeded their original expectations and repaired the relationship with their fan base. Now, do I realistically think that EA will ever do this? No, not at all. Not even a little bit. I hope I'm wrong. I would really like to be wrong, but I don't see it happening. From loot boxes to card packs to microtransactions, just to the way that they treat their fan base. Nothing that this scummy company has done shows me any sign that maybe they might change their ways. At the time of me writing this sentence, Madden 21 has a 0.2 user review on Metacritic, and it honestly feels like you couldn't pay EA to give less of a shit. I've been playing Madden since 2012, and I've been playing The Sims since The Sims 2 Pets came out on the PS2 whenever I was 5 years old. Dragon Age Origins was the first RPG I ever played. My relationship with EA is closer than my one with even Nintendo and Rockstar, but I am sick and tired of being sick and tired of the shit that they consistently pull year after year, game after game. It's time for this to stop. EA needs to change, but they won't. I play video games because they're fun. Video games are a fun pastime to help us forget about the boring routine of our lives. In video games, you can be anything you want, from a professional athlete to a fabled hero who slays evil and gets the girl, to a cyborg with a 2-foot dong. We play video games because they're fun, but when having fun is hidden behind a paywall or hidden inside a loot box where you have a 3.1% chance of enjoying the game you already paid $60 for, then at that point, I really don't see a reason to continue supporting this company. And maybe that's for the best.